Welcome back to part 3 of my Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy Retrospective series. There's a lot to discuss, so let's get right into it. When we last left off, Cosmo used the Continuum Cortex to send us back to Hala's Hope. We're now free to explore, and eventually we come across a locked door. Earlier in the game, if Nikki trusted you enough to give you her passkey, you'll be able to use it to unlock this door. Inside is a workbench and a passageway to more secrets, such as Drax's rap sheet. If Nikki didn't give you the passkey, you'll be locked out of this area completely, so a nice little reward for forming a bond with her. As we continue through the ship, we make a big discovery, a giant ray gun thing siphoning energy from the planet Contraxia. On a side note, you might remember Contraxia as the snow planet that Yondu visits in the second movie. The energy that's being siphoned here fuels various battery packs housed on the ship, but the Guardians aren't sure what kind of energy is being absorbed yet. They fill in Cosmo on what they found, but still need to find Karel, who likely has the answers they need. While we continue to search for her, I thought it was interesting that you can trigger a conversation where Rocket references who won the bet at the beginning of the game.
Nikki's one of the most resourceful kids I ever met, and Karel's a warrior. I'd bet on both of them any day of the week.
Don't get cocky, Quill. Just because you won that bet in the quarantine zone.
Yeah, thanks for reminding me. I'd bet on both of them any day of the week.
Okay, just don't forget who won our last bet, Quill. Remember the quarantine zone?
Yeah, thanks for reminding me.
While exploring the ship, we eventually return to Nikki's hideout. Since she's not with us, we're free to access the room that she previously didn't want us to enter. Inside, Peter finds the Chewbacca figure that he gave to Karel, as well as what seems to be Nikki's attempt at running a paternity test to see if Peter's her father. The test is inconclusive, but since Peter and Karel slept together 12 years ago, and Nikki is 12 years old, the Guardians feel that's enough evidence for them, believing that Peter is very likely her father. Peter isn't quite ready to come to terms with that, though.
For all we know, maybe this guy's her dad.
Yeesh. Looks like an even bigger deadbeat than you.
Looks like Ronan the Accuser to me.
As Gamora mentioned, this appears to be Ronan the Accuser, a big name amongst the Kree race. You'll likely recognize him from the first Guardians movie where he was the villain, but kind of a dopey one if I'm being honest. In the comics, he's far more intimidating and even has moments of heroism. For example, during the Annihilation series, Ronan aided in the fight against Annihilus' forces, and also liberated his Kree people from a group called House Fiero, who had taken the throne for themselves. After being liberated, the Kree people then chose Ronan as their new leader. Ronan was also a member of the powerful galactic peacekeeping squad created by Cosmo, known as the Annihilators. Other members included the Silver Surfer, Beta Ray Bill, and Kazar. So Ronan can be a noble ally, and he's an important figure amongst the Kree, the same race as Karel and Nikki. We get a further sense of Nikki's Kree roots if we look at a target with a Skrull's face attached to it. You might recall Skrulls from the MCU who are shape-shifting aliens. In the comics, the Kree and Skrull have been at war for centuries, fueling a deep hatred between the two alien races, but we'll talk about that a bit more later. This next Easter egg is a bit of a random one, but the rug by Nikki's workbench is the same one from the Shining movie directed by Stanley Kubrick. That movie released in 1980, so maybe it's just meant to be another 80s reference, or maybe a nod to Kubrick since that's also the name of Peter's dog. After leaving Nikki's hideout, we then head to Karel's office. Neither Nikki nor Karel are there, but there are signs of a struggle and a lot of mysterious writing on the wall. While we investigate, the Guardians further discuss the possibility of Peter being Nikki's father. Peter wonders why Karel wouldn't tell him, and Drax explains that the Kree have strict purity laws, where the bloodline must remain purely Kree. Karel getting with Peter was actually against the law, and Gamora mentions that the Kree likely would have hung both Nikki and Karel to make an example of them.
So, when Karel said we shouldn't be doing this...
He was being literal.
Things aren't looking great for Peter, and the Guardians are convinced that he's the father. On the subject of parentage, while we're in Karel's room, we can also find a hologram of the face of her son Zam, who died during the war, which I thought was a sweet detail. As far as evidence though, there's nothing substantial here, so Rocket suggests that we head to the Center of Operations and access its computer. When we get there, we're able to access the database, and there's a lot of information to go through. There's some really interesting stuff in here though, and the categories that I had the most fun reviewing were the personnel files and criminal files, which contain info on noteworthy comic book characters that we don't encounter in the game, and it even includes images of them. First up is Malik Tarsel, a Shi'ar member of the Nova Corps. In the comics, Tarsel became Nova Prime for a brief period, which is basically the title of Head Nova, although this was just for a few issues until Richard Rider was reinstated as Nova Prime. In the personnel files, it stated that Tarsel used his Shi'ar lineage to foster an alliance between the Kree and Shi'ar. However, this broke down when Tarsel was killed by an agent of Thanos. Rocket asks Gamora about this, and she says that the agent wasn't her, so maybe Nebula? There's also a file on Roman Day. In the comics, Day was the one who essentially recruited Richard Rider. In that origin comic, Day was near death and needed to quickly transfer his powers to another being, and Richard Rider was the lucky recipient, beginning his journey as Nova. You may also recognize Day from the first Guardians movie, where he was played by John C. Reilly. In the game's files, it stated that Day potentially died during the Chitauri's attack on Xandar, although that hasn't been confirmed, so it's possible he could still be somewhere in the universe. Speaking of Richard Rider, our next file gives us more detail on him. These logs don't give many further details beyond what we've already discussed, just that Rider is AWOL and has been missing for multiple days now. Nova's current location is sort of an underlying mystery during this game, and it's unclear if he's gone AWOL by his own accord or if he's in some kind of trouble. I feel like this is a thread that's been left dangling just in case the game gets a sequel, which in that case I really hope it does because I'm very intrigued by Nova's whereabouts. In the next file though, we see a character named Samaya. She's a Centaurian, the same race as Yondu. Samaya is also a member of the Nova Corps and featured briefly in the comics. She was there with Richard Rider the day Xandar was attacked by the Annihilation Wave, and told Richard that if he got her out of there alive, she'd mate with him. She then died immediately after saying that. In the game's files, she gets a more noble end. It's stated that as a last-ditch effort to buy Xandar some time during the Chitauri attack, she led his squadron into a collision course towards a Chitauri Leviathan, which killed her. Digging into the criminal files next, we'll start with Christopher Powell, a human hero known as Darkhawk. This ties back to the Collector's Museum, where we saw a raptor amulet belonging to the Fraternity of Raptors. In the comics, Chris Powell found one of these amulets, which turned him into the superhero Darkhawk. In this database, Darkhawk is listed as a member of the banished Fraternity of Raptors, and that they're responsible for several assassinations within the Shi'ar Empire. My speculation is that this could be in relation to the War of Kings run in the comics, where Darkhawk teams up with another member of the fraternity named Talon, who offers to mentor Darkhawk and help him better utilize his amulet. At the time, the Fraternity of Raptors were basically extinct, with just Talon and Darkhawk as its remaining members. Talon hoped to bring the fraternity back to its former glory, starting with Darkhawk. Well, sort of, since we later discover that the Fraternity of Raptors is an evil group, and that Talon's goal was to purge Christopher out of the Darkhawk armor to swap him out with an old member named Razor. It's a bit complex how it all works, so for the sake of this video, Chris's body was taken over by Razor. While wearing Christopher's armor, Razor assassinates Empress Lilandra before Chris is able to reclaim control of his suit again. Still, the damage was already done, and people believe that Darkhawk was the assassin, so he was hunted as a killer. I think this could be what the game is hinting at, or at least something along those lines. The next file I want to discuss is one for Heather Douglas, aka Moondragon. In the comics, she was Drax's daughter from his former life as Arthur Douglas on Earth. During Thanos' attack on their family's car, Heather was able to flee. She was then found by Thanos' father, Mentor, and taken back to their homeworld Titan, where she was raised by monks. This is where she learns to fight and hone her psychic abilities. She's a strong telepath, but she's also influenced by a dark entity, the Dragon of the Moon, which resides in her mind, corrupting her. She actually named herself Moondragon out of pride for her ability to resist the entity, at least at the time. In the database file, it states that Moondragon's current whereabouts are unknown, and that the Worldmind is nervous about the Dragon of the Moon's current influence over her. Another detail I like in this file is that it mentions that Moondragon was in the running to be the Celestial Madonna, but lost out to Mantis, which is true in the comics as well. Still, this file leaves me curious about how Moondragon's origins could relate to Drax, if at all, since it sounds like he's lived his entire life on Katath. Perhaps he had a prior life on Earth he's unaware of, or I guess in this universe her father might not be Drax and could instead just be some normal guy on Earth named Arthur Douglas, but I'm just speculating. Nevertheless, it's fun to see Moondragon listed here since she's been a Guardian of the Galaxy in the comics as well. If we're ever lucky enough to get a sequel to this game, Moondragon's character is one I wouldn't be surprised to show up. But next we have Jack Flag, the same guy we accidentally shot off into space the last time we were here. As far as Jack's comic origins, he was just a regular guy who was inspired by Captain America to protect his neighborhood as a vigilante. Jack originally targeted low-level crime, but later turned his attention to the villain group called the Serpent Society. To properly do so, he extensively trained his body and also crafted an outfit he believed Captain America would be proud of. His goal was to infiltrate the Serpent Society by posing as a new recruit. As an initiation test, the Society sent him to steal a painting from the villain Mr. Hyde, the same one whose formula we saw in the Collector's Museum. While in Hyde's home, Jack got into a fight with him, and Hyde threw him into a table holding some of that formula. It spilled onto him and permanently granted him superhuman strength, stamina, and durability, as well as an accelerated healing factor. At this point you may be asking, how did he end up in space? Well, that's thanks to the superhero Civil War. He was anti-registration, the side of Captain America, and during a fight, he was stabbed in the spine by the villain Bullseye. Unable to walk, he was then taken to a prison in the Negative Zone called Prison 42. He was eventually found by Peter Quill, who helped him and other inmates escape. Peter brought Jack back to Knowhere, where Jack's spinal injury was repaired with alien technology, and he became a member of the Guardians of the Galaxy. In the game, Peter doesn't know Jack at all, and the file states that Jack is just an escaped convict from Earth. He managed to get arrested by the Nova Corps for impersonating one of them. Still, I imagine there's a lot more to his story. Continuing on, we talked a little about Ronan the Accuser earlier, but let's briefly look at his Nova Corps file, since I think it ties things together. In the file, it states that Ronan has recently had his title stripped after attempting to incite civil war amongst the Kree. In the Annihilation series, Ronan was also stripped of his rank after being falsely accused of treason by House Fierro. As we discussed, he later returned to liberate his people from House Fierro and restore his reputation. If the game is going a similar route, Ronan may not have gone rogue as the reports suggest, and could instead be in the process of redeeming his name. Again, something I'd expect to see addressed in a sequel. Just briefly, I also want to mention something of interest in Peter's file. In an addendum, it's confirmed that Peter sold out the Ravagers regarding the crime of kidnapping a 12-year-old girl known as Idera's Sacred Heart. I couldn't find anything related to that name, but it's intriguing nonetheless. Continuing on, there's also Wendell Vaughn, the superhero Kazar. Kazar is the protector of the universe, and is powered through the quantum bands that he wears on his arms. He pops up often in Guardians of the Galaxy and Nova comics, and often plays a major role in assisting them to save the galaxy. The Worldmind acknowledges this in its database, and states that it even has sent him a recruitment package in hopes that he'll join the Nova Corps. Kazar would be another really cool hero to see in a potential sequel, so fingers crossed. In the next file, we actually get to see Yondu. Yondu has apparently attempted to escape from prison 5 times and is yet to get out, but with all this mess going on with the Universal Church of Truth and the mind-controlled Nova Corps, I have to imagine he'll use this to his advantage and soon escape. Again, something that I could see come into play in a sequel. Lastly is Zach Dell, known as the character Wraith. Wraith is a fairly new character, first appearing in the Annihilation Conquest series in 2007. As a child, he was sucked into a wormhole and infected by a parasite known as the Exelon, which are one of Null's early failed attempts at creating the symbiotes that we know today. The Exelon are also referenced earlier in the game by Gamora when she recalls the planet Inaku B being scorched for containing one.
I'm serious, Peter. If it stays on the ship, we all go to prison.
No one's going to jail. It's a harmless space llama thingy.
Harmless? Remember Inaku-B?
Not really, no.
That's because they scorched the planet because an idiot smuggled in an Exelon.
That extreme measure isn't too surprising, given the power of the Exelon. In Zach Dell's case, bonding with the Exelon gave him enhanced strength, immortality, and the ability to control the Exelon symbiote, but at the cost of it absorbing his soul. Wraith is a pretty badass character and not a very well known one, so it's interesting to see him used here in the game. The database's file for him states it was generated at the request of the Kree Empire, who want Wraith apprehended for acts of vigilantism. In the comics, Wraith's parents were murdered by a Kree death squad, something Wraith wants vengeance for, so this criminal file could suggest he's gotten that vengeance, or is at least very close to it, but I'm just speculating. That'll pretty much do it for the character files though, so continuing on with our investigation, we also find a video recording of Karel and her squad exploring the mining station of the quarantine zone. They find the same stone that Peter and Rocket accidentally released, at which point the creature from within it returns and attacks the Nova Corps. After finding this, we're interrupted by Grand Unifier Raker, who wishes to explain things. Groot attempts to signal Cosmo to get us out of here, but Cosmo isn't responding. We're stuck with Raker, who calls over the church's temple ship. We're now inside the ship, as he leads us to someone he calls the Matriarch. Along the way, he explains all the details about the church and what we've been witnessing. The yellow energy is all faith energy, generated by belief from the church's followers and converts, kind of like how Santa Claus's sleigh flies based on Christmas spirit in the movies. The Matriarch is the center of all of this, and promises to bring back those that we've lost. While the Grand Unifier is talking, Rocket informs us that he has a plan for hacking into a device, and that we need to stall Raker. To do so, we'll keep probing him for more info on the church. At one point, he refers to someone as him, who was the first divine vessel before the Matriarch. This refers to the character Adam Warlock, and we can even see golden statues of Adam throughout the course of our elevator ride with Raker. Raker referring to Adam as him is a nod to the comics. When Adam Warlock was first introduced, he didn't have a name and was merely just called him. The Universal Church of Truth is also from the comics, and the game seems to take a lot of inspiration from the Abnett and Lanning Guardians series. In those comics, the Matriarch is also their leader, but really more of a figurehead while someone else pulls the strings. Soon we'll see that the Matriarch is actually a lot more powerful in the game. Grand Unifier Raker is also from the comics, although he was known there as Cardinal Raker, part of the Matriarch's elite attack squad. The Universal Church of Truth was also the first threat the Guardians encountered in the Abnett and Lanning series, so it's fitting that they would be the antagonists in this first game. But next, we need to keep Raker occupied while Rocket attempts to hack his drone. If we stall Raker long enough, Rocket will be able to hack it and track their comm center. However, if you do a poor job distracting Raker, Rocket will get caught and you'll be forced to wing it later. After this, we'll finally get to meet the Matriarch, and surprisingly, it's Nikki. She seems like herself, but pretty soon we'll realize that she's bought into the church 100%. She also mentions that her mother lives inside her, and that the light joined them together, and that she can bring everyone back. Naturally, Star-Lord doesn't like the sound of this, and admits that he thinks it's all a big con, so Nikki decides the best way for them to believe is to show them. Also, I want to point out that we can briefly see that she's wielding the Soul Stone from earlier in the game. We're then transported back to the moment the Chitauri invaded Peter's home, but as an adult. This time, we're able to destroy them and save Meredith. Meredith gives Peter a hug as the background fades to white. We then cut to a time later where Peter examines an old truck. Meredith calls him to come inside for dinner, and we'll find that the Guardians are all here too. This section is on a timer, as the screen will slowly become consumed by a black aura, so you don't have a lot of time to explore. There are quite a lot of different interactions you can have here though, so I'll go over everything I was able to discover around the house. First, we can go straight to the kitchen where Drax has a conversation with Meredith about the quality of her carving knives, and that he'll bring her a Catathian blade instead. He also mentions his wife Hovat and that she makes a great stew. So it seems in this reality, his wife is alive and well. They'll also talk about Peter's love life, and Meredith will try to set Peter up with Janie again.
Your mother was just telling us about your childhood.
Just some of your better adventures?
She also told us she had found a suitable mate for you, but you refused to see reason.
Drax, you said that would stay between us.
Are you still pushing that Janie thing?
She's a lovely girl, Peter, who's turned into an even lovelier young woman.
That's so impressive. He's good.
All the rest of them?
Your son is rather promiscuous, Meredith Quill.
Dude, not cool.
Sounds like we need to have a serious talk over dinner, Peter.
Why do I feel like I'm about to get grounded?
If we don't go talk to them, we can instead go into the living room where Gamora and Rocket are watching baseball.
I still don't know why the hitter doesn't bring his bat with him around the bases.
Or why they don't blow up when they run across them. Like mines, you know?
You two sound like you need to unwind.
Sorry, Mare, it's kind of hard to turn off.
You should take a bath after dinner. It's very relaxing.
Meredith will also yell at Rocket for his bad manners.
I'm flarking starving.
Rocket! Language.
But I said...
I know exactly what you said. And I won't have any scut like that in my house.
We can also explore outside, where we'll find Groot admiring a tree. I also like how Meredith will sometimes react to where you're going, like when you go into the basement, she'll be annoyed and state that you better be going down there to wash your hands. If you go back into Peter's room, he'll find it's all boxed up.
Mom, what happened to my room?
You were gone so long, I had to move on. But I couldn't bear to finish.
There are also a couple items to interact with, the first of which is Peter's laundry basket, and he'll get mad at Gamora for throwing her clothes in with his.
Gamora, what did I say about putting your clothes in the wash with mine?
That you'd be happy to take care of it?
Peter can't ever escape a dysfunctional fridge, since this one needs to be closed too. He also can't escape the Guardian's interest in his toothbrush.
Why are the bristles wet? Who keeps using my toothbrush?
Lastly, you can examine the cup Peter made for Meredith as a child.
Can't believe you still have this.
The craftsmanship is shoddy at best.
Be nice, Drax. Peter tried.
When the screen fades to black, the game will then go to a fake credit scene, where you can choose to either accept the promise or rethink your choice. If you accept the promise, you'll then be kicked to the main menu screen, indicating that that was the wrong choice, but hitting continue will then take you back to the scene of Quill fixing the car. When we rethink our choice, we're taken back to the moment that we were reunited with Meredith. She'll hug us again, and if you don't let go and choose to instead embrace her, you'll go back into that same loop again. What you're meant to do is break away from Meredith and acknowledge that she's just an illusion. You'll then pull your gun on her, and to break free, you're supposed to shoot her. However, this is a really tough thing for Peter to do, so I like the detail that his hand is incredibly shaky during this moment. Even worse is that you have to shoot her twice, which feels really painful to do, even knowing that it's fake. Shooting her exposes the lie, as the creature from the beginning leaves her body and we're woken by Nikki on the Hala's Hope. We're going full Inception, a dream within a dream, except now we're in Nikki's dream where her, Peter, and Karel are a happy family. In this fantasy, it's Karel's birthday, and Nikki needs us to help set up for a surprise party. When Karel arrives, we get a moment to speak with her alone. Karel's spirit takes us out of the fantasy and shows us the truth, that she was killed in the quarantine zone and that Nikki saw it happen. Nikki can't get over the loss, and the creature fed on that pain, converting her into the matriarch, so Nikki needs to accept Karel's death to cleanse herself of its influence. This moment snaps Nikki out of the fantasy, but she still hasn't rejected the creature's influence. Left slightly delirious, the matriarch is ushered away, and we have a brief battle with Raker. He's fueled by faith energy and very powerful, but will eventually fly away and leave us to fight his minions. We'll take care of them and attempt to escape the ship. If you bought Rocket some time earlier, he'll call in the device that he hacked to lead us towards the Milano, a device he's named Gubbins. However, if Rocket wasn't able to hack it earlier, then you'll have to test each door in this area to try and find the correct path, all while endless swarms of church minions fire at you. After going through the correct door, Rocket will tell us that Gubbins is going to need a space on the Milano.
Somebody's gonna have to give up their room. No! Gubbins! He was gonna be the sixth Guardian!
It's truly the most tragic death in the game. Yes, even more than Meredith. But before long, we reach the comm center, and while Rocket does his best to locate the Milano, the rest of the team takes a moment to think about what they saw in their individual promised fantasies. I think this is another moment where the strong writing and acting is showcased, but it's highlighted more through the team's silence. This was also the moment where another main theme of the game became apparent to me, the theme of loss and grief. Each member of the Guardians has experienced great loss prior to joining together, and although they don't tell us what they experienced in their promise, you can pretty much guess. Groot, I assume, saw his homeworld, Planet X, thriving and full of life, and it likely included Rocket, the way Rocket gives an approving nod when he looks back at him. I guess that Rocket probably saw Lila and his friends from Half-World. Drax and Gamora we'll discuss later, since theirs actually get addressed in the story, and they're also very powerful moments. For now though, the console Rocket was hacking into shorts out, but he was still able to call the Milano, so we head towards it. On our way, we spot Raker in the distance. Gamora tells Peter that she's going after him, and she asks us to trust her. As skilled as Gamora is, Raker is a very powerful being, so you might be nervous to let her go alone. You're not given a dialogue option for this choice, but you can either choose to trust her and let her go after him alone, or you can choose to follow her. If you let her go, you'll fight through more of the church, but without Gamora's abilities at your disposal. Now that we're deeper into the game, I've become accustomed to having the full strength of the Guardians at my command, so I definitely felt Gamora's absence. I think this is also a compliment to the gameplay, since teamwork and the idea of being strongest as a team is a core principle. Alternatively, if you choose to follow Gamora, the church will fire at you and blow the bridge that you're crossing, forcing Gamora to save you, ruining her chance at Raker. On the plus side, you'll still have her on your side through these next few combat sequences. However, she's super pissed at you.
When I say don't follow me, I mean it!
I was just trying to help!
I don't need your help! I needed to save Nikki. The longer he has the child's ear, the more damage he'll do.
I know, but we couldn't even take Raker as a group.
Let's just...
Eventually, we'll reach the end of the ship and slide through a tunnel that launches us into space where thankfully the Milano is waiting for us. If you trusted Gamora to take on Raker alone, she won't be with us on the Milano and the team will discuss what to do about her. Drax thinks we should go back for her, which is quite the turn compared to his feelings about her earlier in the game. Rocket, on the other hand, thinks we should leave her behind, since going back would be a suicide mission. Before we can decide, Gamora returns, dropping the severed arm of Grand Unifier Raker on the table. I think everyone is impressed that she was able to wound him to that degree, but she considers herself a failure for not killing him. She probably feels this way due to Thanos' high expectations for success, but also because she feels she's failed Nikki. In a lot of ways, Nikki's capture and manipulation mirror Gamora's early years with Thanos. Thanos destroyed her home planet and her race of people called the Zenhubari. He kept Gamora for himself and raised her to be his perfect assassin, so it's not hard to see how Gamora would feel history repeating itself with Raker in the role of Thanos. So again, very strong writing and character motivation. Alternatively, if you didn't let Gamora chase down Raker, the cutscene will begin with her telling the team that they need to head back and save Nikki. Drax agrees with her, but Rocket is still adamant it's a death trap. We ultimately decide not to go back, and Gamora blames you.
And if you hadn't gotten in the way, we wouldn't be in this mess.
You can't face Raker alone.
At least I would have died doing something I believed in.
From here, the team decides to try and get in touch with Cosmo again. Beforehand, we can check in with the Guardians and wander the ship. Drax seems really conflicted about something, but he won't discuss it with us. He also seems especially out of it when we check in on him in the bathroom later.
Drax? Are you okay? Open up!
Peter Quill.
Are you gonna join us in the cockpit? You got a lot of dog report items for Cosmo.
Perhaps I will. Write them down.
Drax.
Apologies. I will surrender the lavatory. And a few ticks.
Wait. Was that my toothbrush?
We can also talk to Rocket, and if you chose to buy the Nova Lock remover on Knowhere, you can ask him to use it. He'll then laugh at us, telling us we were scammed, so that's unfortunate.
How do I have to say this again? No shopping for tech without Rocket!
We can also head into Gamora's room to discuss the doll we bought for her on Knowhere. She'll open up to us about it, stating that she received her first doll as a gift from Thanos, which sounds nice, but it was just a mind game.
I lost the one Thanos gave me when I was 6. She was the ugliest doll I'd ever seen. I cried so hard when I lost her. Nebula hurt me. She loved her doll, and I knew she wanted another one. So when she came in to check, we started to fight.
Bet Thanos loved that.
He found us fighting, saw my tears, and laughed. Turns out, the dolls were a lesson on the importance of not getting attached. To help us understand that, he took Nebula's doll and threw it into the incinerator.
That's... I can't imagine.
Nebula didn't understand why he did it, only that I was somehow responsible. I started collecting these a few years ago. After Nebula. After I knew I'd never see her again.
I found Gamora's story really fascinating. We get great insight into her relationship with both Thanos and Nebula, and how Thanos pitted them against each other. Also, we learn how cruel Thanos can be. Interestingly, Gamora's attachment to dolls could also be a nod to the comics. In one issue, Thanos' minions are in the process of cleaning out the back rooms of his ship, and they find an old doll. This sparks a memory for Thanos, where he describes Gamora's early childhood, and how his goal was to create a perfect assassin, but one with a sound and rational mind. To do this, he tried to give her a somewhat normal childhood by giving her a birthday and celebrating a couple holidays. During Christmas, Thanos gifted Gamora a doll, but didn't have any immediate ulterior motives like he does in the game. Thanos then leaves the room and is ambushed by a hitman. Gamora saves Thanos by throwing the doll at the hitman, buying Thanos the time needed to kill him. Her doll was partially hit by the blast, so Thanos offered to get her a new one. Gamora declined his offer, wanting to make the doll better herself. Thanos then took Gamora on a trip to a lagoon, and she thanked him for taking her. After reminiscing on this moment, Thanos in the present day talks as though Gamora had too kind of a heart, and that he should have known that she would later betray him. To rid himself of this memory, he has the doll thrown in the incinerator, similar to how he has Nebula's doll incinerated in the game. There's also a Gamora solo comic where a doll is used to showcase Thanos' favoritism towards Gamora. In the comic, Gamora finds a doll impaled to a wall by Nebula. Gamora says to Nebula, "Aren't you a little too old to play with dolls?" To which Nebula responds saying, "I wouldn't know, Thanos never gave me any," at which point she attempts to kill Gamora. The insinuation being that Gamora was given dolls by Thanos, but never Nebula. Gamora then cracks Nebula in the face with the doll, and Nebula stabs her in the leg with a shard of it. Thanos interrupts the fight and scolds Nebula, stating that Gamora is worth more to him than her, so it's clear that they had quite a dysfunctional family dynamic. I thought these parallels were interesting though, and I like how the game amplifies these comic moments to fully flesh out Gamora's backstory. I also like how nothing is as simple as it seems in this game, and that even something as normal as a doll collection has a deeper meaning than we initially realize. But after we're done hanging out on the ship, we can call Cosmo to fill him in on what we learned. Cosmo informs us that the church has made its way to Knowhere, so he shut down the Continuum Cortex for safety, but that also means we can't teleport back to him. He also says that this church problem is getting out of hand and that we need to go speak with Worldmind and request help. Before we can do anything, a fleet of ships arrive to surround us. The leader then FaceTimes us, introducing himself as Captain Glory, leader of the Lethal Legion, who have been hired by Lady Hellbender to capture the Guardians. We already met 2 other members of the Legion, the Blood Brothers on Knowhere. The Guardians don't have time for this, so Quill hits the boosters, ready to destroy the Legion and get back to business. This leads to a gameplay section where we get to pilot the Milano and shoot at the enemy forces with the ultimate goal of destroying Captain Glory's ship. Compared to the earlier flying section, this is much closer to how I wanted it to play. We can freely fly around this area of space, dodging and shooting as we please. It's exciting getting to play through a dogfight in space, and I felt like this was a standout moment in the game, and one I wish we had more of. As far as the Milano gameplay itself, the controls are pretty simplistic and fairly limited, so I do feel that this would be a good area to improve on if the game ever received a sequel. But as it stands, I'm happy it's in the game at all, because honestly, this Captain Glory fight could have been cut entirely and it wouldn't affect the story. And really, the other flying sections we get in the game could just be replaced with a quick cutscene, so I'm happy the developers were willing to include Milano gameplay at all, so I don't want to discount its inclusion. I should point out another detail I like about this fight, and it's that a prior choice in the game determines how powerful your weapon systems are here. More specifically, if you chose to hide the llama from the Nova Corps, allowing them to take your illegal tech, you'll only have these standard blasters on the ship. However, if you chose to hide the illegal tech, Rocket will use it to upgrade the Milano's weapons to include powerful tracking missiles. These missiles are pretty awesome and make me think Rocket was right to keep the tech, especially since Cammy remained on the ship anyway, so it might be worth the extra 1,000 unit fine to go this route. Although the gameplay is still plenty fun with just these standard ship blasters, and I actually enjoyed the added challenge from that, so I guess it's up to personal preference. But after destroying Captain Glory's ship, we immediately head towards the Worldmind. When we arrive, we find a slew of ships all waiting outside New Xandar, begging for help from the Nova Corps. Unfortunately, communications are down, and there seems to be no way to speak with the Worldmind. As a last-ditch effort, the Guardians decide to go through the station's welcome system and try to find a way to speak with them. The first page asks what language you'd like to proceed with. The first option is Cree, and if you select it, the game will commit you to it, forcing you to either select items blindly, not knowing what they say, or back out and select another option. The third option is Krakoan from the island Krakoa, which has been an important location in recent X-Men comics. An alphabet guide for this language was also revealed in the comics, so we can see that the text on the game screen is just A, B, C, C, H, D. If you try to select this language, Rocket won't let you, and we'll select Standard Galactic instead. On the next screen, we're given 3 more options, and one of which is to submit an application to join the Nova Corps. Within it, you're given different answers to select, often joke answers that the Guardians will attempt to input for you. As you're selecting, you can try to swat their hands away to prevent them from picking. I tried a variety of different answers during this section, but it seems to always end up with the Corps telling you that they'll reach out in approximately 1,000 years from now. You can also select the Officer Directory to get information on certain Nova Corps members of interest. However, I didn't feel like any of these selections told us anything we haven't already discussed. From here, we only make progress if we choose to pay a fine, which grants us access to the Worldmind. The Worldmind is the collective experiences and personalities of all the dead Xandarians, and is essentially a supercomputer. Fun fact about the Worldmind is that its design is a little different from the comics. There, it's usually a disembodied head resembling a Nova Corpsman. During a Nova comic run, Worldmind was damaged and had to switch personalities for protection, and it chose to resemble Corel. So in that way, she lived on a bit longer in the comics. If the game ever gets a sequel, I hope Worldmind does something similar. But now that we have its attention, we can talk to it about the Universal Church of Truth. However, the Worldmind has already decided that it and the remaining Nova Corps need to warp out of this area and escape the Church, in order to preserve Xandarian culture. The Worldmind believes that the Church is unstoppable at this point, and that there's nothing they can do. It also states that the only hope for stopping the Church is through the aid of Adam Warlock, the Church's previous divine vessel, but Adam died around the end of the Galactic War, so the Worldmind believes that the only option is to run forever. You're given a few dialogue options during this interaction, and if you attempt to provide new intel and perspective to Worldmind, you can successfully plant a seed of doubt in its thinking. If you attempt to argue with it, you won't make any progress, and Worldmind will remain unconvinced. Either way, Worldmind will then end discussions and prepare to warp away. After your conversation, the computer will still ask you to pay your fine, and you're given the option to either pay it or ignore it. If you pay it, the Nova Disabler will be deactivated. If you don't pay the fine, well, we'll discuss that when we get into it. Alternatively, if you try to pay it but you spent too much money on Knowhere, the Nova system will state that you have insufficient funds, prompting Gamora to call you out.
I knew it! I knew you spent Lady Hellbender's money in Knowhere.
You saw me?
You were there?
I was watching your back.
Great. All the way to Seknarf and back, and nothing to show for it.
I'm sorry, alright?
The subtitles don't line up with what she says there, but they pretty much read that she couldn't see what we were buying, just that we were using all of their money. From here, the Nova Corps warp away, just before the Church warps in. We need to get away from the Church and come up with a game plan, so Quill warps the Milano far away, and the team are given a moment of reprieve. While in a random part of space, the Guardians start to argue amongst themselves. Everyone is exhausted, and Star-Lord tells them that he needs some rest, something the rest of the team decide to do as well, so everyone heads to their rooms. Before we go to bed ourselves, we can first take a shower. At the end of his shower, Peter will wipe the steam off the glass and peer through it. This is a nod to Deus Ex Mankind, and replicates the protagonist's shower scene. Afterwards, we can prompt Peter to use his toothbrush.
What am I doing? Everyone on this ship's been using this. Not today, brain parasites.
Definitely a smart call to throw it away. But so ends the toothbrush saga on the ship, and I'm sure the Guardians will be sad to see it go. Before heading to bed though, I also caught a fun interaction between Rocket and Groot.
Don't call me Rocky. I don't call you Groody.
This is a nod to the comics, where Rocket is often called Rocky by the other Guardians, although he never makes a fuss about it there, at least not in the issues that I've read. As we head to bed, we'll find Cammy sleeping on it, Peter's shoes are out, and she'll head either through a hole that she's chewed into our wall, or head out the front door. This is dependent on whether or not you chose to hide her from the Nova-Corps. If you hid her, she would have spent time chewing through your wall. If you didn't hide her, the ship will be normal. But both of these will have a bigger impact that we'll discuss shortly. For now, we go to sleep. We're later woken up by Drax. He's rambling about being able to see his wife and daughter again, and it's clear that he's accepted the promise, as his eyes begin to glow purple. He's terrifying too, and I think that's a credit to how well the game has built him up. We know he's an extremely powerful force, way beyond our level, and he has a very intimidating design to bolster that. The cinematography is excellent here too, since the close-up camera shots make him feel bigger and unavoidable. With him taking up so much of the screen, we get a great sense of claustrophobia, simulating the trapped feeling that Peter must be experiencing. I also like how this mirrors Drax waking us up in the beginning of the game, and how it's unnerving both times but in different ways. The first time it was jarring in the sense of this being our first alien encounter, but here we can't even take comfort in him being a friendly ally since he's not in his right mind and could actually hurt us. I also like that hints to Drax turning are sprinkled throughout the game, where he'll do and say strange things after experiencing the promise. For example, when he jumped into what Rocket believed to be a toxic chemical pool, since he didn't have a clear grasp on what was reality and what was a dream. He also speaks as though he's talking to Chimeria, and we just assume he's talking to Rocket.
Trust your instincts, little one.
Little one? Guess it's better than Abomination.
You are a silly little thing.
Then there's another moment if we let Gamora go after Raker.
I will not leave Hovat behind again.
Hovat? You mean Gamora?
Yes, of course, the lethal one.
Also, Drax will occasionally mention hearing things that we don't.
Did you hear that?
Hear what?
There was...
Oh!
Another example is while the Guardians are arguing over each other, their voices muffle together, and we can see in the subtitles that Drax says, "The promise must be freely accepted."
Can't just sit here.
Nice.
And how are we gonna do that? We're dead in the fucking water!
If they find
Promise
us,
must
we're
be
screwed.
freely accepted.
Oh, yeah.
There are multiple other examples throughout these couple levels, and I really like how subtle they are. You get the sense that Drax is going through something, but there are so many other things to focus on that it kind of bleeds into the background. It's not until later on, or maybe a second playthrough, that you really recognize these moments, and I love these little details. I also thought it was fitting that it was Drax who was corrupted by the promise, since in the comics, the Matriarch manages to get in his head there too. Going back to the moment at hand, we'll do our best to relay to Drax that we've either accepted the promise or we're very close to it, and also try to convince him that the rest of the team will accept it as well. No matter what you choose though, Drax will ultimately lock the Guardians in their rooms and leave the ship. This is where Cammy comes into play. If you hid her away from the Nova-Corps, that hole she chewed through your wall will provide the perfect escape hatch for you, allowing you to run to the front of the ship and unlock all the doors. Before doing that, you can also get some fun interactions with the Guardians if you continually knock on their doors like an idiot.
Seriously, Peter, it's locked. Can you go unlock the doors? Now!
Want me to spell it out for you? It's flarkin' locked. Quill, I swear to Groot, I will shoot you in the face.
If you chose to hide Rocket's tech instead of Cammy, there won't be a hole in the wall, so the Guardians will have to improvise. This leads to a really fun mini-game where the Guardians realize that Cammy is free roaming the ship, and that she's either attracted or repelled by the sounds of certain Guardians' voices. More specifically, she likes the sound of Star-Lord and Groot, but not Gamora and Rocket. The solution is to alternate singing to try and steer Cammy towards the ship's wiring so she'll chew it. Once you push Cammy towards the wiring, she'll eat it, releasing the Guardians from their rooms. Now that we're all back together, we decide we need to next free Drax from the promise. We also discover that while we were asleep, Drax attempted to fly us to Sacrosanct, the home of the church. However, he inadvertently took us to Lamentis, home of the priests of Palma. Gamora mentions that she's been here before, thanks to Mantis. Earlier, Mantis mentioned Gamora's suicidal urges. Well, this is where Mantis brought Gamora to help her relax and find herself again. You might also recognize the name Lamentis from Loki Season 1, since Loki was trapped on a moon called Lamentis 1 during Episode 3, so not exactly the same location as where the Guardians are now, but similar names. Continuing on, we soon find Drax, who's in the process of harassing the priests. Drax is too much for the Guardians to handle, but thankfully, Mantis shows up to lend a hand. She's a skilled martial artist, and also displays some awesome arm blades, shaped to help her resemble a praying mantis. She's even able to single-handedly take down Drax. Afterwards, she states she can't remember if she learned martial arts from either Lai Sao or Omphad, both of which are from the comics, with Omphad having a brief appearance during an issue helping Moondragon and Phyla-Vell. My guess is that she learned from Lai Sao, since he was the one who trained her in the comics. Mantis also reveals that she was the one who got Drax to accidentally come to Lamentis by whispering a course correct into his mind, which is what we saw her do on Knowhere. Mantis then jumps on Drax to telepathically control him, keeping him at bay while guiding us towards some caves that we need to investigate. Blocking the cave is a Kotati. As far as the origins of the Kotati, it goes all the way back to the origins of the Kree-Skrull War. Millennia ago, the Kree lived on one half of the planet Hala, while the Kotati lived on the other. One day, the Skrull arrived, looking to peacefully expand and share their advanced knowledge. They would only share their resources and knowledge with one of these species though, and created a test to see which one was most worthy. The test required both species to select a group to be taken to a remote moon, where they would then create their own world to the best of their abilities. The Kree built a gleaming city, but the Skrulls ultimately chose the Kotati as the winners due to their ability to create beauty and limitless growth through their plants. Enraged, the Kree lashed out, attacking at first the Kotati, before turning their attention to the Skrulls. This is what began the Kree-Skrull War, while the Kotati were believed to be extinct. However, they were later found and safeguarded by the Priests of Pama, the pacifist Krees. In exchange for safety, the Kotati helped the priests learn and hone the ability to communicate telepathically. Eventually, the priests left Hala and snuck the Kotati with them to Lamentis, where they now live together in peace. As we explore the caves, Mantis will often chime in with some interesting details. One example is that she'll occasionally refer to Groot as Sir Groot. This could be a nod to some of his earlier comic appearances, where he was regarded as a king. There's also King Groot from the mobile game Contest of Champions. She also mentions that Rocket commonly dies of drowning in different alternate timelines, a likely reason why he has a fear of water in this one. That, and how he mentions later that the Kree perform sensory deprivation experiments on him by keeping him in tubes of water. This will become an important part of the level, with one section requiring us to clear a waterfall for Rocket so he can walk past it, since he refuses to go through it out of fear. This comes to a head when the Guardians are forced to fight spooky fog apparitions of themselves, and need Rocket to blow a hole in the wall to stop it. To do so, he'd have to walk through a waterfall to reach the ideal location, so he initially refuses. But after members of the team become incapacitated, he finds the courage to run through the waterfall, blow up the wall, and save the team. Rocket faced an immense fear and came out better for it, which is highlighted through unlocking his ultimate ability, which can be utilized during combat now. I thought this was a pretty cool tie between gameplay features and notable character moments in the story, and each of the Guardians will go through a similar moment to unlock their ultimate ability. From here though, the Guardians continue deeper into the cave until they find a mysterious home emitting a golden light. They're then attacked by a powerful golden man. The Guardians attack him with all their skill and might, but the stranger continuously comes out on top. Thankfully, Mantis has a solution. She releases Drax against him, and for a moment, the being that's possessed Drax speaks through him.
Found you.
With that display, Mantis then retakes control of Drax, demonstrating that we're all on the same side. It's also revealed that the Golden Stranger is Adam Warlock, the Church's original divine vessel who the Worldmind believed to be dead. There's also someone else in the area, and that's Pip the Troll. Pip will show up during blink and you miss it moments, so he's extremely easy to overlook, so much so that I wouldn't be surprised if some players never even knew he was here. In the comics, Pip is often a traveling companion for Adam Warlock, so it's fitting that he'd be in the area. That's the last we'll see of Pip though, and with everyone else now at peace, they head inside the home of Adam Warlock, which I believe is meant to be a cocoon. For that to make more sense, let's talk about Adam Warlock in the comics. He was created by a group called the Enclave, who sought to make the perfect being. After Adam was created, he sensed that the Enclave had evil intentions for him, so he rebelled against them and escaped. Adam next went to space, regenerating himself in a cocoon. Recuperating through a cocoon is a common occurrence for Adam Warlock, which is why we see it referenced here in the game, as well as in the movies. While in space, Adam was found by the High Evolutionary, who was the one who gave Adam Warlock his name, and also granted him the Soul Gem. Adam helped the High Evolutionary by fighting one of his rogue creations named Man-Beast. Adam later went his own way until he encountered a character named Magus. We actually see that name in the subtitles as the voice that speaks through Drax. In the comics, Magus is the evil, future version of Adam Warlock with a wicked perm. Magus is extremely powerful and is also the creator of the Universal Church of Truth. Magus conquered a planet called Homeworld, and the survivors of his conquest bowed to him as a god. He played that up, creating the church both to praise him and be his loyal army to help him conquer countless other worlds. Adam knows that he must stop this future from occurring, and actually finds aid from Thanos of all people. Thanos doesn't just do things out of the kindness of his heart though, and ultimately wants to help Adam stop Magus because he sees Magus as his only true competition. This also ties into Gamora's origins. The Universal Church of Truth aimed to conquer the people known as the Zen Huberies, who resisted against them. The church was too powerful though, and decimated them. All but one, since Thanos saved Gamora at the last minute, hoping to channel her rage at the church to create the perfect assassin and his secret weapon against the Magus, who wouldn't see her coming. This tactic ultimately failed, so they had to find another approach. The solution was basically to send Adam Warlock through time to the point where the Magus was about to take control. Adam then claimed the soul of that Adam Warlock and kept it inside his soul gem, essentially destroying that timeline in the process. It's quite a complex story, but hopefully that gives more context to aspects of the game's story. For now though, the Guardians fill Adam Warlock in on what's been occurring in the galaxy. They also need to free Drax, and they need Adam's help to do so. Mantis then puts everyone to sleep and collects them all in the mind of Drax. This leads to some really awesome visuals as the Guardians walk towards what appears to be a moon. Peter even references it looking like a Space Odyssey, a Stanley Kubrick movie with a very similar looking opening sequence. As we get closer to the moon though, we're in for a startling surprise when we learn that it's actually the head of Drax. Once inside, we get to see Drax's promise for ourselves. It's a very dark and gloomy environment filled with destroyed Catathian imagery. Drax is mourning the loss of his family, and we can even spot him burying them. This is also when his grief turns to rage as Thanos appears laughing. Drax charges towards him, and we're meant to follow. This takes us to another standout moment where we're faced against Thanos himself. We even get to fight him, but it doesn't go as we expect. After beating him the first time, he clones himself. The more we fight him, the more he'll continue to duplicate, and it becomes clear that we're facing an unwinnable battle. This is meant to symbolize Drax's obsession and how he needs to let go. Once we stop fighting and let Thanos beat us, we progress to the next stage of Drax's mind. It's here that we find Drax's happiness, where he's reunited with his wife and daughter. When the Guardians try to reach out to him, he's then teleported away by the promise. We'll track them down and witness another sweet moment between him and his family. Drax holds a lot of love, guilt, and grief towards his lost family, and seeing them interact makes it clear why he's been so susceptible to the promise. The Guardians try to reach out to him again, and he seems a bit more receptive to their words, but still chooses to continue towards his family. We'll catch up to Drax one final time and attempt to talk him out of living this lie, something Drax really struggles with.
My Holvat was the most fearless mate I've ever known. She brought me peace even during times of war. My Camarilla. My innocent little Camarilla. She was the best of us both. Despite her meager stature, they both were.
It's an incredibly touching scene, and I love how the writing and performances can take us to such emotional depths. You really feel for Drax and can easily sympathize with what he's going through. It's clear he knows the promise is a lie, but he wants so badly to see his family again that he's willing to go along with it. It also puts into perspective how so many other people and worlds have fallen prey to the promise as well. I've complimented the game's story multiple times already, but I think this is a moment that most epitomizes how strong the creative direction is through the combined effort of multiple teams. The writing, the acting, the music, the visual direction all come together to enhance this moment, and I thought it was really powerful. I can't compliment it enough, and it's way more than I expected from this game if I'm being totally honest. Like with the stages of grief, Drax ultimately reaches the point of acceptance and is able to say goodbye to his family and end the illusion. This causes the creature to manifest itself and return to its true form, the Magus. Adam and Magus battle it out, and Adam is able to absorb it into himself. We then return to the real world, where Drax is now free from the promise. Coming to terms with the death of his family was a big hurdle for him, and it unlocks his ultimate ability. Also receiving an upgrade is Adam Warlock, who returns in a new wardrobe, ready to take the battle to the church, so we continue forward. Along the way, Adam describes his origins in the game, mostly with how it relates to the church, so let's discuss these origins, as well as Raker's even. Starting with Adam, his early creation isn't explained, but the game's bio for him describes him as a man of mysterious origin, found drifting through space in a cocoon, and unable to remember his past. So it's possible his origins could follow the comics, picking up after being created by the Enclave, or maybe after his time with the High Evolutionary, or the writers could have other intentions. Nevertheless, Adam was found by Raker, who was part of a mining colony, as their chief scientist. During a prior mining mission, they accidentally uncovered a deadly disease, which killed many of their colony, including Raker's only son. This is when Raker happened upon Adam drifting in space. Miraculously, Adam was able to cure Raker's colony. This gave Adam purpose, and he began to travel with Raker, healing those in need. Soon, Adam was worshipped as a god, which is how the Universal Church of Truth began. However, internally, Adam began to hear a malignant voice whisper to him, wishing to feed on those that worshipped him. He called this dark side Magus, and he believed it to be a symptom of his soul gem gone sour. Adam chose to have the gem removed, and Raker developed a device to do so, although Raker probably aimed to harness that power for himself, so it's unlikely he was doing a noble deed for his friend. Still, Raker was successfully able to separate Adam from the stone, but as he describes it, Adam was cast out to the cosmos and split from the Magus. This sudden disappearance is likely why the world believed Adam to be dead, and when he awoke, I assume he formed this cocoon on Lamentis to heal. After Adam's disappearance, Raker's church began to dissolve without its golden god, so Raker went searching for another solution, which I believe is what he was doing in the quarantine zone, hoping to find the Soul Stone. As far as Magus, it seems he was kept inside the Soul Stone for a while until the Guardians found it in the quarantine zone and accidentally released him. Magus then used Nikki as a vessel to feed on the followers of the church through their faith. In order to stop Magus, we'll have to focus on Nikki and try to get her to break from the promise like Drax did, and then destroy Magus. That's easier said than done though, and once we exit the caves, we see that the church managed to take over Knowhere, and now has access to the Continuum Cortex, meaning they can teleport all over the universe. The team need to return to Knowhere, but Mantis decides to stay behind and help the people of Lamentis before joining back up with us. Back on the ship, Warlock is upset that Mantis didn't join them, since he believes her to be a valuable ally in this fight. He blames Star-Lord for this failure, since he's the leader. After his tantrum, he heads to Star-Lord's room and locks the door. This begins a minor contest of leadership between the two of them. We can then head to our room to try and talk with Warlock and convince him to help us fight the church. The two of them interacting is pretty fun too.
Before such a blaze, still a stooge may steer, but your wide-eyed wonder is merely wit and moxie. You strut as an insecure cock, uncertain of his stature.
Does that mean what I think it means?
This audacity acts as stilts on sand as the tide thralls you in. Leading must be wrought off the fullness of your yearning yoke. Will it be so?
As tough as it can be to understand Warlock sometimes, Peter is able to convince him that he will lead the team to the best of his abilities, and Warlock agrees to help them. By the way, as far as how Warlock speaks, in the comics he definitely has a distinct manner of speaking and a strong vocabulary, but not to the extent it's exaggerated in the game. He's usually not this unbearably Shakespearean and doesn't use so many alliterations. But now that we've spoken with Warlock, we can check in on the other Guardians and discuss some artifacts that we've previously discovered. First, we'll speak with Drax, and he'll tell us about Catathian tattoos. The red markings on his body are the tattoos, and they're created to remember important events in their lives, such as getting married or having a child. The tattoos also relate to Catathian beliefs, where once you die, you are judged by the great kings and queens of the past to deem if you are worthy to enter the gates of Ul'Tath, which is essentially their heaven. The kings and queens use the tattoos as a means to read the milestones in your life. If you are deemed unworthy, you are sent to Sarduth, which is essentially hell. So pretty interesting lore there, and I like how it adds meaning to Drax's body markings. We can also discuss a meditation artifact with Gamora, where she describes more of her time with Thanos and Nebula. In particular, she mentions how her and Nebula would try to have fun during training and missions by throwing bad puns at each other mid-fight. She says that it became a competition between them to see who could make the other laugh. This explains why Gamora throws out so many puns during battles.
Nice to meet you! Way to knock some sense into him! Cut to the chase! Sever his ties that bind! Having fun preying on the weak?
During this chapter, there's also a fun missable detail if you look out the window. If you ejected Jack Flag earlier, you'll see him floating through space again, so he's on quite the journey. However, there's a common bug that you might have experienced in its place, where Jack Flag instantly shows up on the ship. You can't talk or interact with him in any way, he just stands there. It's altogether pretty weird, creepy, and funny, but it's also cool to get an up-close look at his character model. After exploring, we head back to the cockpit and travel to Knowhere. It's overrun by the church, and we'll need to find a way to gain entry. Thankfully, Drax's earlier connection to the Promise gives him the know-how to lie to the church and convince them that we're also converted. As we land, Warlock decides to do things his own way, evacuating the ship to handle things solo. When we land, our ruse about being converted doesn't last long, as the church almost instantly realizes that we're not who we say we are, so it looks like we're fighting our way through Knowhere. As we explore, we find it's in way worse shape than when we were last here. Everything is destroyed and in flames, and even Rocket's favorite bar, Manlow's, has sadly been destroyed as well. There's also no sign of the Collector's Emporium. Rocket mentions that the museum is also a ship, and that the Collector must have left when he learned of the Church's invasion. You can also find a missing persons report stating that a child named Clid ran into the museum right before it took off, so the Collector has a stowaway that he may or may not know about. This also felt like something that would be an Easter egg, but I can't find anything related to Clid, so I'm not sure of its importance yet. Another interesting thing you can find on Knowhere is Lipless. In a prior video, I mentioned how I had to fight Lipless in this location when I did poorly in the duet and became his enemy. Coming back to this location, Rocket and Groot will discuss it.
I kinda stumbled on my buddy from the bar down here.
Didn't he say he'd kill you if he ever saw you again?
He tried, and failed.
In my playthrough where I maintained his friendship, I found him dead in this same alley. So a pretty sad end for Lipless no matter which way you go. Continuing forward, Gamora will find a doll on the ground, and my speculation is that the doll reminds her of her younger self due to the green skin and how the outfit kind of resembles her look in the movies. Rocket will also refer to the doll as garbage, something Gamora takes offense to. Off in the distance, Gamora witnesses the church converting more citizens, the last of which is a young girl, and we see the moment she's manipulated into the promise. This triggers Gamora, who races towards them and starts a fight. Gamora is in such a rage that we no longer have the ability to command her attacks, and we have no choice but to fight alongside her. Afterwards, we get to see the extent of her fury. After witnessing all that, Peter tries to talk to her, but she's not in the mood. Like the scene where Drax rejects the promise, I felt this was an equally powerful scene, where we get some really great insight into the mind and motivations of Gamora. Also, I want to highlight how great the facial animation technology is, since I think it really elevates the performance.
I know Raker brings back bad memories.
This isn't about Thanos! It's about Nikki, and what men like Raker and Thanos do to girls like her. Like me. My sister. If I had just been better at protecting Nebula, maybe she wouldn't be dead.
Whoa. What? Nebula's dead? How? By who? Tell me, so I can find him and shake his Kratak in hand.
By me.
You killed your sister?
She is the one you saw in the Matriarch's promise.
That's how I knew it was a lie. The Nebula I knew had been twisted into a hateful, vengeful monster thing. One who would never stop unless I stopped her. So I did. I just never expected to survive.
Why didn't you say something?
It's not exactly a conversation starter. Hi, I'm Gamora. I murdered my sister. Can we be friends? Of course we can't. How can you be friends with a monster? Why would you want that on your team? A team I actually kind of enjoyed being on, all things considered.
Well, I hate Nebula, so I actually would have... What? I'm just saying it don't change nothing.
Actually, it changes everything. The most deadly woman in the galaxy just admitted she loves us.
I want to start by complimenting Kimberly Sue Murray, the actress who portrays Gamora, because I think she did an incredible job with that scene. Gamora is going through a lot. She's finally voicing a secret she's kept to herself, and is nervous that the people she cares about will reject her for it. It's a very vulnerable moment that I think is executed well. This is also a character-defining moment for Gamora, so we're rewarded with her ultimate ability afterwards. This also fills in a lot of pieces in Gamora's backstory, including why she was in such a tough mental state that she needed to go to Lamentis to recover. Then there's the lore that Nebula is dead, killed by Gamora. We really don't know much about Nebula in this game, so she's quite the mystery. We just know that she didn't betray Thanos like her sister did, and that Nebula eventually tracked Gamora and tried to kill her. Still, her death defines a lot of Gamora's character, so I think it's an effective use of her. However, part of me isn't entirely convinced that she would just stay dead if there was a sequel. There's nothing in the game to suggest she's still alive, she just seems like a notable character that maybe could make a comeback in a big way. Continuing on though, we next head to the Watchtower to find Cosmo. Along the way, we encounter Raker again. One cool detail about this scene is that Raker will be missing an arm here if you trusted Gamora to fight him. However, he'll still have his arm if she never had that opportunity. Raker fires an energy blast at us, but Adam Warlock swoops in to block it. Raker is stunned to see Adam alive, and the two begin to fight. During their scuffle, Rocket even takes the opportunity to shoot Adam in the leg. Raker and Adam's fight takes them out of sight, so the Guardians continue forward towards Cosmo. As we progress, there's a fun moment that demonstrates the team coming closer together and learning to respect one another. We'll reach a bridge that's raised, and Rocket knows he could hack it to release it, but he needs to get to the other side. Surprisingly, he offers to have Drax throw him across. Out of respect, Drax will instead choose to throw an object to lower the bridge instead of throwing Rocket. It looks like this moment will play out the same whether you chose to throw Rocket or not earlier in the game. The only difference is how Gamora responds to Rocket's statement.
Are you kidding? After the fit you threw last time?
This ain't like the last time. You all... I trust you guys.
Do you have any idea how far down it is if you miss?
We ain't got time to argue. I'll make it.
I thought this was an effective moment at showing how far the team has come and highlights that the Guardians are finally starting to see themselves as a team and a family. After this, we find Cosmo and learn that he's embraced the promise. Cosmo is startled by our approach and traps us in place. Our only hope is to speak some sense to him. That won't be easy though, as Cosmo is pretty ingrained in the promise. He describes being happy on Earth, back with his family prior to being launched into space. What seems to make the biggest difference in helping Cosmo out of the promise though, is reminding him of his puppies. If you jog his memory, he'll begin to snap out of it, and also use his nose to confirm that the humans he's seeing have no smell. He'll break free and run to rescue his pups. If you instead choose to empathize and talk about your own loss, Cosmo won't be triggered to investigate the lies of the promise further, and he'll remain trapped. He'll also keep you trapped in this psychic hold, and the way you break free is through a ball that Peter conveniently has in his pocket, distracting Cosmo by playing fetch with him. I guess Peter thought ahead by bringing a ball, I'm not sure. Afterwards, we head to the Cortex to free it from the Church's control. It's hooked up to a bunch of Faith batteries, so we have to detach all 4 cables. I thought this was another good team-centered mission, due to the never-ending assault of enemy forces who can easily overwhelm you, so your best option is to use the Guardians to clear a path while you handle battery detachment. To further demonstrate the teamwork, the last cable requires the combined effort of 4 Guardians while Groot shields them. With Faith energy now cut off from the Cortex, the Guardians have freed it from the Church's control. Nikki isn't ready to give up yet, and still believes that she can fulfill the promise. Raker also arrives, and we learn that he defeated Warlock and now holds him captive. The Church then retreats with Warlock, but at least the Guardians have reclaimed Knowhere. Rocket also reveals that when he shot Adam earlier, it wasn't just a fun pot shot, but instead a tracker that he placed on him. If you were able to free Cosmo from the promise, you'll follow the tracker immediately. If you didn't free Cosmo, this level will continue to play as you attempt to exit the Cortex. As you leave, you'll be intercepted by a possessed Cosmo who traps you in another mental prison. This time your illusion is an inescapable back alley maze. As we're running through the maze, we'll eventually hear a dog barking, leading us to search for the source. We'll eventually come across one of Cosmo's puppies trapped in a glass box. This dog in particular is the Runt and is essentially a normal dog without the telepathic gifts of the rest of the family. Still, he knows how to free us and we follow him to the exit. The Guardians are appreciative and offer to have him join them on the ship. However, he instead decides to stay on Knowhere to help his family. It's a really sweet extra level, and I like that it's the Runt of the litter that helps us out, since I think he mirrors the Guardians in a way. Both of them are underdogs and out of their depths in comparison to what they're facing, but still show bravery and determination, so I like this little alternate mission. Once aboard the ship, the Guardians follow the tracker and learn that Warlock is being kept on Sacrosanct. The Church's forces still vastly outnumber our own, and the Guardians know they'll need an army to help them get inside, so they begin to brainstorm ideas. Interestingly, Drax suggests that Peter use his heritage as the Prince of Spartax to rally his people for the fight, but Peter says that's not an option.
Spartax was sacked during the war because of its tech. You can't even land there anymore.
That's an interesting detail, and it makes me wonder what's happened to Peter's father since then. But I'll save that thought for once we complete this game's story discussion. I also like that Gamora suggests that we call on Earth's heroes for assistance, an idea that I actually think is the best one, and probably the one they'd go with if this was a comic. Instead, Peter states that Earth is too far behind technologically, and that they need a fleet at their side. Fair enough, but that still leaves us with no solutions, at least until Cammy sparks an idea for Peter. He realizes that animals probably aren't perceived as valuable to the Church, so they likely haven't been converted. Lady Hellbender has a whole army of monsters, which could be the solution to their problem. Of course, Lady Hellbender hates them right now, so Peter's idea is to give her a peace offering, an irresistible monster for her collection.
The one beast that you'd want more than any other. Drax knows what I'm talking about.
Oh, yes!
Oh, no.
Here it comes!
You know where we're going!
To Maklu-IV! To battle the legendary Fin Fang Foom!
As Drax stated, they all head to Maklu-IV and risk their lives to capture a legendary beast. As we descend towards the planet, Drax mentions that many Catathians have also made this journey, hoping to defeat Foom or at least die a legendary death. As you'd imagine, they all receive the latter. Maklu-IV also has a treacherous atmosphere full of debris floating around the planet. Peter is unable to successfully traverse it, and the Milano crash lands onto the planet. Instead of being annoyed though, the Guardians find it hilarious how common this is for them.
It's perfect! This is us! This is how we park!
Well, this is how Quill parks anyways.
The team's camaraderie continues as we head towards the back of the ship, where Drax wants to share with us a Catathian battle anthem. He'll begin to sing and ask the team to repeat after him. You can either choose to join in, stay silent, or shut it down completely. I personally enjoy either joining in or staying silent, mostly to listen to the hilarious singing of Gamora and Rocket. If you're curious about the Catathian language and what the words in the anthem mean, it turns out they don't really mean much, which writer Steph Jolin describes in a Square Enix blog post. We didn't really have time to come up with a full conlang for Catathian during production, but there were already a few vocabulary words scattered through the script like Sarduth, Morgoth, and Ultoth that I tried to incorporate into the lyrics. The lyrics of the anthem were mostly wrapped around the meter and are completely made up. Senior audio director Steve Shipkowski also describes the inspiration for the Catathian battle anthem. For the melody, I gave Richard one direction, which was that I always loved the old Soviet Union national anthem, and I felt anything from Catath would have that same feeling of strength, history, and pride. It's sad but strong at the same time. This moment is also meant to signify the comfort between them as a team, another example of them finally becoming the Guardians of the Galaxy. From here, we begin our journey to find Fin Fang Foom. While looking around, I want to mention that Maklu-IV was visually one of my favorite locations. It's beautiful with all the snow, but also deadly with the constant debris crashing into the planet. You get a good contrast of beauty and danger in this landscape, which I really appreciate. I also like the hints of red rock beneath the snow, almost like it's bleeding. This is quite different from the Maklu-IV in the comics, which is more of a barren desert, so I like that Eidos Montreal went a different way with it. As we hike towards Foom, we'll occasionally find markers from Catathians who previously braved this journey as well. Coming across these markers gives you an eerie feeling when you realize that nobody that's come here has survived, and that we're just witnessing the remnants of death. Still, this journey was important to them, and also important to Drax, so I like the deeper meaning as it relates to his character as well. On our hunt for Foom, we'll also encounter another noteworthy creature.
Hello? We're looking for Fin Fang Foom, you seen him? Big wings, nasty teeth.
Purple shorts.
What do you mean, purple shorts?
What, I heard he wears purple shorts.
Ancient legends do tell of such a thing.
See?
The purple shorts they're talking about are actually a nod to the comics, where Foom did indeed wear purple shorts. Also, the creature Peter found is known as a Wendigo. In the comics, the Wendigo originates from Canada and is the result of a cannibalism curse. The curse states that anyone who eats the flesh of another human in the Canadian wilderness will turn into a Wendigo. Interestingly, the game seems to maintain some of this history through the lore bios. There, it's stated that the Wendigo isn't native to Maklu-IV and must have ended up here via a crashed ship from Earth. From then, it's said to have reproduced by biting others, kind of like a vampire bite, so I wouldn't be surprised if some of Drax's Catathian brethren are some of the Wendigos we fight in this level. The Wendigo also announces itself by saying its name. In the video showcasing how the metal vocalist brought these characters to life, we can see Corin Cardinal's awesome Wendigo voice in action.
That is so badass.
We'll also fight the Wendigo leader near a crashed sword ship. Gamora speculates that they were using it for shelter, and I wonder if this was the ship carrying the original Wendigo, especially because the ship is marked Biohazard. My guess is that the leader we fought was the original Wendigo. As far as SWORD, you've likely heard of S.H.I.E.L.D., the agency that defends Earth from major threats, but there's an offshoot called SWORD that defends Earth from intergalactic threats. Why SWORD launched a Wendigo out into space is unknown, but perhaps they were trying to get rid of the Wendigo threat on Earth by shooting it as far away as possible. That's just my speculation though. Regardless, we'll next find a burning campsite. Foom has been here recently and destroyed the army that was camping. We'll find one lone survivor whose name is Ruby Thursday. Ruby is a character from the comics and part of a villain group called the Headmen. It seems Ruby is part of the headmen in the game as well, since we can find a message she sent them regarding this failed Maklu-IV mission. She addresses the message to someone named Chandu, another member of the headmen in the comics. Chandu has some mystical abilities, but visually his look changes often since his head gets transplanted onto various other bodies, thanks to another team member, Surgeon Arthur Negan. Negan is also referenced in this message, and Ruby mentions finding him a suitable body instead of the smelly gorilla suit that he wears. In the comics, Negan has a human head but the body of a gorilla. He was a normal human at first who transplanted the organs of gorillas into humans. However, this angered a group of his gorillas who somehow gained human intellect. So as revenge, they managed to transplant Negan's head onto the body of a gorilla. As far as Ruby herself, the game's bio for her describes that she didn't always have this orb head, and actually replaced her normal head with this one. This orb contains an organic computer, allowing her to control the various limbs protruding from it, either as weapons or tools. Later, Peter makes a comment about the limbs.
Imagine what she could do with all those hands.
Don't be gross.
What? I didn't mean it like that.
Yeah, Peter definitely has a tentacle kink. But anyway, we can also learn from the hidden data files around the world that Lipless was working for Ruby Thursday, and by extension, the headmen on Knowhere. They were operating a poaching ring, taking various animals and people, and separating the heads from their bodies. The Nova Corps data logs suggest that they don't know what the headmen do with the missing body parts. If I were to guess, it's probably more of Negan's transplant experiments. Ruby warns that the Guardians should leave this place, but they don't listen, and continue their pursuit of Foom, eventually reaching the giant obelisk marking his location. Foom actually shows up, and is as legendary as expected. He's also received a redesign for the game, but his purple pants are paid homage through his purple underside scales. Overall, I think Foom looks great, and I like the addition of his ice armor. Our boss battle against him is equally epic too. We first need to remove his ice armor, and thankfully, Peter unlocked the fire element for his guns earlier. Once we've used the element guns to melt the armor, Foom will increase the difficulty by blasting an obelisk in the sky, causing it to rain debris down on us. This is where things start to get really hectic as we try to evade the incoming projectiles while still damaging Foom. The Guardians use the debris to their advantage though, as Groot turns his vines into a slingshot and Drax uses his strength to launch a piece of debris back at Foom, stunning him for a moment, allowing us to pour on some damage. We'll then follow this pattern for the next couple phases. Overall, I thought this was a great fight and probably my favorite in the game. Foom feels powerful, downing members of the Guardians frequently, and I rarely felt a moment of calm as I was forced to constantly dodge and evade against him, so I think this was a worthy battle against the legendary Fin Fang Foom. Surprisingly, the Guardians are able to defeat him, but it seems that they did a little too well since they accidentally killed him in the process, even though the goal was just to capture him. Even worse is when Lady Hellbender and her monster army fly in at the same time. This is thanks to Mantis, who convinced Lady Hellbender to hear out the Guardians, which she's willing to do until she realizes we killed Foom, sending her into a rage. Groot comes in clutch, displaying a previously unrevealed ability, allowing him to revive Foom. This is Groot's big moment, which unlocks his ability to revive fallen teammates in combat. This calms Lady Hellbender, and she ultimately decides to assist the Guardians against the Church. We're now approaching the climax of the game, so in true cliffhanger fashion, I think we'll have to stop here for today's video. I'll be back with part 4 shortly, the final part of this series where we'll wrap up the story and discuss other aspects of the game, like the gameplay and sound design. So thank you all again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.